Leaders and leadership have become especially relevant topics, with the national elections of many countries happening this year, various movements led by polarizing figures that are trying to affect social, political, and economic landscapes, and even in Ateneo alone with the recent changes to the Sanggunian and its constitution. We believe it is then apt to discuss how Ateneans perceive leadership, specifically the personalities they associate with good leaders. Personality is the unique way in which a person thinks, acts, and feels. Personality can be interpreted through four different perspectives: the psychodynamic perspective, pioneered by Sigmund Freud; the behaviorist perspective, pioneered by B.F. Skinner and built upon by Albert Bandura; the humanistic perspective of Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers; and trait theory, which is the perspective we will use in this video. Trait theory, unlike the previous three perspectives which focus on how personality develops, is instead concerned with describing personality through traits, consistent, enduring ways a person thinks, feels, and behaves. From the description of someone's personality and personality traits, trait theorists then attempt to predict that person's behavior. In order to apply trait theory to leadership, we conducted a simple experiment. In our experiment, we asked randomly selected groups of people who in their group they would choose to be their leader for any general situation. This engages them to make a judgment on what they think a leader is or should be. After, we ask the group what behaviors the person exhibits to make them choose him or her as their leader. In this, we get a more concrete idea of their perception of what a good leader is and what behaviors are expected of them. Lastly, the groups are given a list of 16 pairs of traits, the trait spectrum in Cattel's 16 personality factor questionnaire, and are asked to select which trait in each pair is more consistent with the personality of their chosen leader and the behaviors they describe. This gives us the traits Ateneans associate with good leaders and leadership, and this would also be the traits they think would predict leadership ability. The applications of trait theory and leadership were very common in the early 20th century until the 1940s. Models of trait theory and leadership re-emerged in the 1980s, such as those of R.J. House, which recognized both the importance of the situation and the qualities of the individual as determinants of successful leadership. Other studies in the 2000s, such as those of Judge et al., Peterson et al., and Zaccaro et al., have reasserted that traits can empirically predict leader effectiveness. It would be logistically difficult and outside the scope of this class to apply the methods used in the aforementioned studies. It would also be wrong to relate the findings of their studies to ours, except in the most general of senses, because of how different the methods of experimentation and data analysis are. But it's also enough to know that such research exists and is currently relevant to psychology, because this, in a way, shows the importance of similar studies like ours. The behaviors the leaders were said to exhibit include performing a variety of tasks for the group and succeeding in all of them, being responsible and managing the entire group in their work, making decisive, rational, and impartial decisions, asserting dominance over the group and delegating tasks to the individual members, having the final say on decisions where the group is split, remaining calm during stressful situations, taking initiative and challenging the views of other members of the group, among other similarly described behaviors. From the trait spectrum we presented, 62% of leaders were more outgoing than they were reserved, the number of concrete and abstract thinkers among leaders were equal, 100% were emotionally stable and easily upset, 75% were more dominant than they were submissive, the number of serious and happy-go-lucky leaders were equal, 77% were more rule-defying than conscientious, 70% were more bold than shy, 58% more tough-minded than sensitive, 70% were more trusting of other people than they were suspicious, 58% were more practical than imaginative, 77% were more forthright than shrewd, 75% were more self-assured than insecure, 70% were more experimenting than conservative, 85% were more self-sufficient than group-dependent, 92% were more self-controlled than undisciplined, and 82% were more relaxed than they were tense. From this, we see that the traits are consistent with described behaviors. The high percentage of self-sufficiency and the equal split between the kinds of thinking makes sense if the leader can perform different tasks. Being responsible and managing the group's work, and also being dominant and delegating tasks, is consistent with the high percentages of dominance, boldness, and tough-mindedness. The ability to be decisive is consistent with the same traits as those for asserting dominance, as well as the high percentages for self-control, self-assuredness, and forthrightness. Same is true for the ability to take initiative, which is a behavior also consistent with the high percentage of outgoingness and the tendency to defy rules and to experiment. And lastly, the high percentage of emotional stability and relaxedness is consistent with the leader's ability to remain calm in stressful situations. Our conclusion to the experiment are similar to those of Stephen Zaccaro in his 2007 review of literature on trait-based perspectives of leadership. First is that a combination of different traits are more likely to predict leadership than individual traits, despite traits not necessarily predicting each other in trait theory. This is seen in how multiple traits are shown to be consistent with different behaviors. Second is that a leader's traits reflect an individual's ability to lead across very different situations, shown by how all the dominant traits for leaders were consistent with outgoingness and adaptability regardless of situation. And third is how some leader traits do not have the same immediate effect on an individual's ability to lead, as seen in the traits for the kinds of thinking, practicality, trustingness, and seriousness not being necessarily consistent with any specific behavior. This concludes our video on a trait-based analysis of how Athenians perceive leadership. Thank you for listening, and we hope you learned something new about trait theory and its possible applications.